The title for our first film was unexpected, so we needed a story in which there is a climax at the end. So we created a horror slash thriller kind of story about a house where at the end our actor gets trapped in one of the rooms in the house. And we used projectors while shooting to get a more creative idea, something that was out of the box and something we could experiment with. So our whole film didn't just lead up to a lackluster climax at the end, we wanted something more. My role on the film at the beginning was the more pre-production stuff, and I also co-wrote it. But on the shooting days, it took us a long time to start rolling because a lot of the people in our group didn't know how to use their equipment, and this created a lot of tension because it was taking so long to start shooting. So I had to cool this off and make sure everyone knew what they were doing, research their equipment there and then, just so we could start rolling. So you could also see I became a kind of a first assistant director. For research, we found this old book called Video Installations and Art, and in that book it had a section called Amazing Colossus Man Video Installation, which showed these projections in windows of a guy's eye kind of thing. So with this, we needed a location which would work with the projections. But like Mike Figgis says in his book Digital Filmmaking, his philosophy of film is that the story is the most important thing, so it shouldn't be complicated to find an environment or location. So we took this, knowing we only had 2 weeks, looked at Tommy's place and saw we could use the projectors and it has the kind of visual style we want for the film, so we used it. For the script of the film, we wanted to get the actor point A to point B, the room which he gets trapped in. And I had just seen Halloween, the original, and at the beginning of that film they build the tension well by having Michael Myers as a child, starting outside the house, then slowly getting closer and closer to his victim, building that tension. And so we used this and used the script to build the tension and show our actor's journey to where he gets trapped. And the start of the film, we also used an establishing shot of the house because it's a good visual language to reveal the location for the audience. But it also puts the audience on edge because they see the house first and know something's wrong with it and they know something's going to happen. What went well with the film? I think overall the film was good. We combated the light well, especially because we were doing a night shoot. And I think for the pre-production side it went well, especially because none of us had worked together and I managed to keep everyone up to date on what was happening here because I created a lookbook document which had all the info and which everyone in the crew had. But we did have a problem with the camera where the battery only lasted 20 minutes when not plugged into the wall, and we also only had the projectors for 1 day. So everything that had to be shot aside with projectors had to be done quickly in the limited time we had. And so I made a shot list for the film, and we managed to rearrange that so we knew what to film when, so it made it a lot quicker. So that was a good thing I had that. And for health and safety, we were shooting in complete darkness, so whenever we weren't shooting, I made sure someone turned the domestic lights on so no one tripped on the heavy tripod with the camera on it. And in conclusion, I think the team worked well, we just need better communication in the group. When we found out the title was The Promise for the film, we had no clue what to do really. The only ideas we had was we wanted to have cool lighting like the film Suspiria, and I also had this idea for a cool set design where a guy sits on the floor with a record player and records are scattered all around him. And this is because the focus for the film was mise en scène, and so I thought it would be a cool idea to have a very repetitive thing in the shot at all times, to in a sense overload the mise en scène, to kind of make the audience uneasy and to show the mind of our character in the film. And so we had this cool set idea, we needed the story about the promise. So we all sat down and brainstormed, came up with ideas like how you promise yourself to quit an addiction, and also how religious people promise things to God. So with this, we talked about addiction and how that could focus on the story, and how people always promise themselves to quit but never do. And we also wanted to get a more dreamy effect, and we were inspired by the scene in Bad Lieutenant, which has Jesus in it. And so from this, we came up with the story about a guy who's promised himself to quit, and he has these weird dreams in which they're kind of like his subconscious telling him not to quit. And it meant we could use all this dreamy imagery of mise en scène in it to show this man breaking his promise. That's why we had the burning papers, which had I promise on them to show him losing his will to keep that promise. But when editing, we encountered problems with being able to distinct the dreams and real life together. And I just watched Easy Riders, and in that they have these transitions where they flash between the two shot changes, and I thought it'd be good to use in our film between the dream sequences, because it makes the audience feel quite uneasy because of the flashing going back and forth, and they know we're changing to something completely different, but they're still related because they flash in between each other. I thought the final cut of the film was okay. I thought we did a good job with the lighting, because we managed to make each real life scene in the film look like it was filmed on the same day and time, which is what you want to achieve with lighting. And of course the 3 elements of lighting a set were done well, like the fill light, etc., backlight. I thought the lighting in the record scene could have had more harsher lighting to make it look more dreamy and more like Suspiria, but we had to buy cheap light gels online because the kit still didn't have any. And so that's why the lighting wasn't what we wanted. And also with those cheap gels, if we left them on the lights too long, they would start to melt. And so we had to be careful with health and safety so we didn't set the set on fire. And I think I used set design and mise-en-scène well to differentiate the dreams and real life. And I think by making the dreams have loads or little mise-en-scène in the frame, so something looked off for the audience, and the real life scenes I designed the sets to make look like somewhere the character would live. I think that was done well, and it was easy for the audience to tell what was a dream and what was real life. And in the end, I enjoyed my role in the film, creating the design for the film. And also me and Tommy taking our first step into writing a small part of dialogue, which I think we did okay at. Just need better actors than ourselves who could really sell the role. But I think this film took a bit too long to make for the outcome, so our group definitely need to work on that. We had a great idea for the broken short, but our plans fell through for it, and it was unable to happen. So I came up with this story idea about this guy who was something broken with him, whereas a struggle for him to be in open space is a bit like agoraphobia. And so apart from coming up with this story idea, I was also director of photography and I was camera operator as well, which I really liked doing. But because our film was sound design driven, I thought the best sound design film is the breathing part in 2001 Space Odyssey. And so I wanted to use this idea of sound in our film. So we had this idea where at parts of the film we'd only hear the actors breathing. Then it would switch back to the ambient sound so the audience can feel the actor's anxiety increasing and increasing with the breathing, and then switching back to the ambient sound, just showing that our actor was paranoid. And to match this mood with the camera, using visual language, I wanted our actor to feel trapped and lost in the shots. And so whenever we'd film it, I would break the rule of third rule. And I wouldn't put the actor in the middle thirds, and I would put him more in the lower left or lower right thirds. It's a subtle way of showing the audience that he's trapped and lost, because he is pretty much in a sense lost in the frame. Also as well, we had a 135mm lens, a very zoomed in lens, which we used for the close-ups at the peak of the film where our character's reading the notebook. And this is because close-ups are a good way to make the audience feel quite jarred and uncomfortable because they're so close to the character. It's like they're there in their face and can feel our character's anxiety in the scene because it feels like they're there. And it also relates to the idea of being trapped, because if you look at the close-ups in Silence of the Lambs where Hannibal is in jail, they're really close and intense to show that he's locked up. So we kind of mimic that to show our character kind of being trapped in these open spaces. But because we wanted ambient sound of our character's footsteps, when we were doing the tracking shots, we could hear everyone's footsteps because the camera was heavy and the boom pole was heavy as well. So we were all walking carefully, but maybe a bit too loudly. So in post, the ambient sound was hard to use. So next time, the shoulder rig might not be the best idea when we need the walking sound. And also carrying around the shoulder rig and the boom pole, we had to be careful when traveling because we didn't want to affect any of the public's safety. So we always made sure the equipment was dismantled as small as possible so we didn't hit anyone when we were traveling. But I liked walking around to the different locations and getting footage. Just maybe next time we need someone better at sound design. For Inverted, our last one, we got inspiration from the painting Not to Be Reproduced. And with this idea of the mirror, it meant we could experiment and use a green screen. And so our film became a more conceptual film where our actor talks about his individuality and existence into the mirror, which isn't actually there. And my job on the film was the more technical side on how to shoot and light a green screen so it works. So for this, our camera settings had to be a certain way. Our ISO had to be as low as we could get it with the lights, so we didn't get grain because that affects the green screen in post. And our shutter speed had to be 125 so we didn't get motion blur. But our green screen wasn't great. It was hard to work with, so we had to take a more simple approach to get it to work. And I said, as long as it's lit evenly, it will work in post. So instead of putting the light straight at the green screen, we bounce them off reflectors because they make the light disperse and make it more even onto the green screen. And this is a good way to adapt. And it's like Judith Winston says in her book, Film Director's Intuition, directors must activate their full intelligence. And I had to kind of do the same for the technical side and just think, how can we get this to work? Which I think I did well. The thing that didn't go well was getting the mirror frame to work in post. I think because the way it was lit was too different to how our actor was lit, so it didn't match, and I think that's something I would change and do better if we did it again. But also working in a small room with a lot of people with the green screen made a lot of safety problems because it was hard for anyone not to run into each other and break or hurt someone. So we had to be very careful when filming. And I think having that many people on set was maybe a bit too much and maybe why our film didn't come out the way we wanted.